In our society, we are not taught how to feel and sort through our emotions. One of the big things we get out of addictions is it numbs the emotion. And then the next day, well, now we have to carry guilt, shame, regret. We've damaged relationships, spent money we didn't really have, done things that we're embarrassed about, creating more of those emotions that we haven't really dealt with. And so now I need that addiction even more to help me suppress what I've already done.
This is Hard Knocks Talks.
Sabrina, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yes, and what a journey. Where did you come from today?
I'm from Fort St. John. I live in Fort St. John, but I've been touring around a bit, promoting my book, and I was in Abbotsford last weekend.
Mm-hmm. So you reached out to me a number of months ago, and you were a teacher for 20 plus years, and in that experience, you recognized some challenges in your community, and as a result, you became a registered clinical counselor, and now you're a published author of a book about core belief and anxiety. So, what the heck are you doing on a podcast about addiction?
So I was a learning assistant teacher most of my teaching career. So did a lot of work in small groups with kids that struggled with learning, writing, behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so they often struggled with confidence, anxiety, pieces like that. Towards the end of my teaching career, I got into counseling and just assumed that I would be a school counselor for the rest of my teaching career, or rest of my career period. And then I went to a workshop on suicide, and it was a 3-day workshop presented by a man named Tony Martins, who does a lot of work around mental health. And at the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I need to do. This is where I need to go. So we went back and forth for about a year, and he finally agreed to teach me his model of therapy. And so I quit my job and started my own private practice based on this model of therapy around kind of our core belief. So that core belief is feeling not good enough, not important, not valued, and how we need to work on challenging things at that core belief level because we're constantly drawn to support and reinforce that core belief. And I hate having to turn people away and say, sorry, there's nothing I can do. So I decided to write the book, Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety, to provide a resource for people who can't address counseling through finances or wait lists or whatever it might be. With that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, generally what we find, if someone is really struggling, that core belief is really significant, not good enough, not important, not valued, there's a higher need or a higher risk of addictions becoming more and more and more of a concern.
So you must have a pretty heavy presence of people on your client list that are struggling with addiction.
Absolutely.
You must have people that are reaching out saying, my niece, my nephew, my son, my daughter, my mom, my dad.
Absolutely. The model I practice is very much a very strategic model of therapy where we're really going through and sorting. We're not so much worried about the addiction. What we're looking at is, why is the addiction there? So rather than focusing on alcoholism or drugs or pornography or whatever it might be, why are we going there? The model believes everything we do for a reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So we need to look past the addiction and really look at what's going on underneath that's feeding this addiction. So we're looking at, what is a person's core belief? What are the experiences they've been through in their life that have created this need to be able to go to something like an addiction as a way of coping with things? And so we often see people who've had a lot of trauma, where there's a lot of emotion, and basically in our society, we are not taught how to feel and sort through our emotions. So we suppress them. And when we look at addictions, one of the big things we get out of addictions is it's a bit of a break where we don't have to deal with the emotions. It numbs the emotion, but only temporarily. And then the next day or whatever it might be, well, now we have to carry guilt, shame, regret for using the night before. We've damaged relationships, spent money we didn't really have, done things that we're embarrassed about. ultimately end up creating more of those emotions that we haven't really dealt with. And so now I need that addiction even more to help me suppress what I've already done. And it just is this cycle that just feeds off of each other, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're looking at what are the emotions that you've been holding in the vast majority of your life? How do we help you sort through and get better at feeling your emotions so that you can feel your emotions? If I can feel my emotions, I don't need the addiction anymore to suppress the emotion because I'm okay to feel it.
Say I come in and like, I can't stop using, I can't handle the guilt anymore. I got nothing left. Where do we go from there?
Right. So one of the first things I'm not going to do is tell you to stop using, because that is not of any benefit. If I tell you to stop, are you going to? No. And it just makes you feel unheard, maybe even some judgment there, right? So I don't worry about getting you to stop. What we look at is, well, let's look at the history. When did it start? When was the first time you drank? Or, what is the substance that you are using? What are the other things that you maybe are addicted to and you don't even realize, like anger, like avoidance, like pornography, coffee?
When you said the first thing you're not going to do is tell you to stop using. Now I have a story that I want to interject here.
Okay.
It's my own personal story.
Okay.
The day that I decided to go to detox, my mother's been in the addictions field for 40 years. She's now retired. And when I reached my bottom, I didn't even know that I had reached it yet. And she took me out for lunch one day, and she sat me down and she said, Dan, you need to start going, you need to go back up north to work. You need to get stable housing. You need to do this, you need to do that, and whatever. And she said all of these things, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, don't I need to get sober to do all those things? And she said, yes. And she pulled out the form and it was all filled out. There may have been a date on it. And she slid it across the table and she said, sign right there. So she Jedi mind tricked me into detox that day when she said that I needed to do all of these things, but she left out the getting sober part, because she knew if she said you need to get sober, that would have just pushed me further away.
Right.
So what you're saying there really aligns with my own personal story.
Yeah, for sure. It just shuts people down and makes you feel unheard as soon as you're telling someone what to do. Because so much when we look at people that are struggling with addictions, they really are just in survival mode. Their ability to really stop and make a decision is really impacted, because what do I need to do to get through the second, the minute, maybe the hour? So to actually stop and make a decision where I'm really just thinking about what's best for me, that's something that a lot of people have never really done significantly. So my job is really to just slow things down. Let's get a better understanding of where you're at, help you understand things at a bit of a deeper level, so you're now able to make healthier decisions for yourself in figuring out what you need to do to move forward. And all of that is a process within itself. It takes time to get there.
Like, okay, so you sit down, someone starts saying, for example, maybe I can't stop using it. When I try, I get angry and I yell at my kids and I yell at my wife and I storm out of the house and I end up using anyways. Now we've said that the first thing that you don't do. So having said that, what is the first thing that you do then?
If we do feel like we are fit and we're going to move forward, then what I usually do is spend a bit of time talking about anxiety, how anxiety is really connected to lack of confidence, not believing in yourself that you can handle things. And so we talk a bit about anxiety, about symptoms of anxiety and what really happens with anxiety. A lot of people feel like it's kind of this cloud that overcomes them. Once you realize that you're creating your own anxiety with your own thoughts, second guessing yourself, not believing in yourself, we need to build that up, because if we're going to go back and dig through everything, you've got to believe in yourself you can handle doing it. If you don't believe in yourself you can handle doing it, those are often times where I don't end up seeing those clients anymore. They end up leaving and removing themselves from counseling. So we need to spend some time and kind of build that confidence up where they believe that they can handle doing things. Then what I do is I go through and I learn all about my client's life. And this takes sessions. It can take anywhere from 3 to 7, 8, 9 sessions where they're really just telling me their life story, all of their experiences. as I'm doing that, I'm listening for what are the things that are contributing and developing that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. But what also happens is the client also starts to make connections and understand things and see things that they've never really seen before. They start
Mm.
connecting dots that haven't really been there. One of the things about talking with people in our lives is it's hard to be really just open and honest, because with everybody in our life, we have some sort of an emotional connection. So we're worried about saying things that may, upset someone or be held against us later on or be judged for. Whereas with me as a counselor, I'm just here to listen to you. That's it. So people are more open and honest about things. They start talking about things, having memories they haven't thought about for a really long time. So after we've done that, then we start going back and looking at specific things of, okay, how did that core belief not good enough develop? And we look at childhood traumas and, abuse and neglect, relationships with parents, all those kind of pieces. And then we slowly start working through and sorting through those pieces as well.
I mean, when we come in, and like I know when I came in, I was on fire. Like, I was on fire with resentment and guilt and all sorts of horrible things that I was just like, I don't even know if I want to be here anymore.
Right.
So how do you calm that fire? And maybe this can offer some insights into other people who are either struggling themselves or have loved ones who do.
It's helping them understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So someone who has a lot of anger, they often carry a lot of shame and guilt and regret that they're hurting people that they love and care about. But I know as a therapist, they're not doing it because they don't care about them, they don't love them. I know they're doing it as a way of almost self-preservation. It's what they know. It's what they've been doing for a really long time. That core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, you're going to be drawn to behaviors that reinforce and support that core belief. And so if I'm yelling at my family, I can then take that and say, see, I'm not good enough. It reinforces that core belief for me.
Mm-hmm.
So until I really work on challenging and changing that core belief, the likelihood I'm going to be drawn more to those kinds of behaviors become really significant. So when I'm using, I can reinforce and support that core belief. Now I'm not using, well, that doesn't support that core belief anymore. So now I have to be drawn to something that does reinforce it. And we'll see it where people, we'll see it where people will be doing really well. Everything's going really good. And then all of a sudden they sabotage themselves and their family goes, I don't get it. Why are they doing this? Because they need to reinforce and support that core belief. That's why it's vital to really work at it from that core belief perspective and change that core belief. Because if you feel good enough, important, and valued, then you're going to be drawn to behaviors that reinforce and support that core belief.
Things that have helped me a lot in my own recovery is recognizing that there's multiple, possibly infinite versions of myself within myself. But two of the things is the experiencer and the observer, right? Now, the experiencer in me is very quick to yell some days, very quick to and be very punitive as a parent, mostly as a parent. The observer doesn't like that, right? And I think that reinforces what you're just mentioning. So what sort of techniques do you use to help people recognize that and to observe their own reactive behavior?
So the first step is awareness. Once we have that awareness, then we have to kind of slowly start working on it. So now I'm getting angry, still getting angry, but after I go, oh, I got angry again. And so there's that reflection or that observer piece where it's after the fact going, oh, I did it again.
Now, not necessarily, oh, I got angry again, but oh, I reacted again.
Right.
So
sure.
it's not necessarily the feeling, because people feel angry, and angry can be quite healthy and productive sometimes. However, it's the way we use that anger, right? And if it's reactionary and we can't even stop ourselves, and that's, again, that's a very much aligns with addiction, right? Like we have this reaction, we don't feel good, we're going to react and get high,
right?
So that's I'm interested to know, like, if you came across someone like that, like how do you address that this is reactionary, and how to recognize the reaction before it's too late?
So when I say getting angry or reacting, so what I mean, I'm using anger as a way of your anger is damaging relationships. So it's more of that reaction, right? So I'm reacting, and after I go, oh, I reacted. I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully I'm going, okay, what happened? What was going on? What strategies can I use to help me prevent that from happening next time?
Mm-hmm.
Then we get to the point where we react. And in the moment we're going, I shouldn't be doing this, but we kind of go, screw it. I don't care. I'm doing it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And we continue in that process. So then we do that and practice that for a while. Then we get to the place where we react and we go, stop, you're reacting. And we pull ourselves out of it while we're actually doing it. Then we get to the place where we are proactively going, no, don't go there. We can pull ourselves out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that process in itself can take a really, really long time. And sadly, for a lot of people, they never ever get there because they're still in that unawareness place where they don't even really realize it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're going through that, we're also looking at, we talk a lot about the cycle of anger. So there's a cycle that happens where it starts with the big explosion, the anger. This is where the reaction happens. We're damaging relationships.
Or the using.
Exactly. And that's what this is the cycle of anger.
Yeah.
But really, it is the cycle of any unhealthy coping strategy we're using to suppress emotion.
Yeah.
So we have the reaction, then we have the honeymoon stage. This is where, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I'm really going to work on it. Can be very genuine, can be more kind of just trying to pacify, it depends on each person in it.
Just trying to feel better.
Exactly. And this is the part where the family reconnects.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of hope. This is the part that keeps the cycle going because everyone kind of draws back in and goes, okay, hopefully maybe this time it'll be different. But then life happens. And so if we've got someone who is really struggling, who's had a lot of trauma within their life, they're already carrying a ton of emotion. Daily life, running late creates emotion. Spilling your coffee, forgetting to pick up cereal for the kids, realizing, I didn't do the homework or sign the homework journal before they're going to school. All these little things create emotion that we have to now add to all the emotion that we are already carrying. That gets harder and harder and harder. So now I need a trigger so that I can explode and get angry or have that reaction, whatever it might be. And a lot of people really focus on the trigger. I have families where we've got an angry parent and, the angry parent's coming home and one kid jumps up and puts a dog outside because a barking dog was a problem a couple of weeks ago. The other one quickly wipes up the counter because that was a trigger, a few days ago. The other one is, putting the laundry away because the laundry in the front room was a trigger 2 days ago. Parent comes home and there's shoes in the front entrance and the explosion happens. Now there's been shoes in the front entrance every day for the last, year, never been an issue. Now all today it is. So it's not about the trigger. If it was about the trigger, we would have a much higher success rate of just removing those triggers. My emotion is full up. I need a reason to get angry or react so I can try to let go of some of that emotion. The problem with that cycle is the emotion kind of gets released, but then it falls right back in and adds, now I have to carry the shame, the guilt, the regret of all those other emotions that I've just created from this cycle that happened as well. Over time, that cycle gets more and more intense, happens more and more frequently. The behavior becomes more and more intense. That's where we see unhealthy coping strategies moving more into addictions. That cycle is just repeating itself over and over and over. Now I need more and more intense behaviors in order to get what I need out of that cycle. So it becomes more and more intense. And even like you were saying, you often find that reaction more with around the kids, parenting. Well, that makes sense because there's going to be more emotion there. These are your kids. You love them. You care about them.
I want them to be perfect.
Well, and that becomes then us, where as a parent,
It's a reflection of me.
Exactly. And I'm not doing a good enough job, right? Because I feel not good enough. I feel insecure as a parent. And I think every parent probably should feel insecure as a parent because there's not a lot of parenting workshops and classes that you can take. We're getting better at more books and different things that are out there.
But it's such a diverse experience.
Right. And a lot of it are about things that you should do out here rather than what do I need to do here to actually become a better parent.
Yeah.
And so then I'm more likely going to be triggered when I'm dealing with my kids because there's going to be more emotion there. And what we say about anger is it's not a standalone emotion. There's other
secondary.
emotions underneath anger that I don't like to feel. Rather than feeling those emotions, I switch it to anger. So things like vulnerability, fear, rejection, abandoned, powerless, insecurity, self-doubt, unheard, unloved. We don't like to feel those emotions. So when those come up, I need to go to anger as a way to push those emotions down.
I did that exact thing, and it took me so long to realize it. When Donna and I, my wife, when we split in a very awful way. Like, she went to the street, and a bunch of bad things happened. But I hid behind resentment for years. I was just, all I could feel was anger, because it was easier to feel hate and anger than it was to feel the hurt from losing that love, and that she might not make it, and she's out there struggling and very dangerous situations, like we're actual danger. And all I would allow myself to feel, and not even knowing it, right?
Yep.
Like, I didn't say, like, you have to feel anger because you can't feel love right now.
No.
That wasn't it. It was just dangerous levels of resentment.
Right.
So I can really identify with it and affirm what you're saying.
Right.
So
Can I ask you, resent what?
her leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Resentment actually isn't about the other person.
No.
It's
No?
about, no, I don't really. So if I were you, it's not really about you resenting Donna. It's about you resenting in yourself that you weren't able to be the person that you wanted to be, so that Donna would stay. So now Donna is out there struggling. Your part of that is because of your behaviors, your addictions, the way you treated her, the anger, all those kind of things. Way easier to blame her than it is to take responsibility for our own part of it.
No.
And so resentment becomes a key part of that.
Now, there was a certain amount of that, but as I grew in my recovery, I recognized that as shame and guilt. That I didn't do what I needed to do to keep her safe.
Right.
You know?
And that's what's underneath resentment for sure, is that shame and that guilt for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Resentment is, so we talk about responsibility. What does it look like to avoid responsibility? Resentment, blame, anger, denial, avoidance, playing the victim. Those are all things that I do where I can avoid my own responsibility. Once we, and I agree, the vast majority of people aren't even aware that this is kind of what's going on. We've just been doing these behaviors for so long, they're unconscious. We're not consciously making the decision. It just is happening. It's what we do to help us survive and cope with the skills that we have to the point that we have, that the experience is happening in. As we become more confident in ourselves, and my core belief is more good enough, important, and valued, the more willing I'm going to be able to take responsibility for my own actions and behaviors. But if I don't believe in myself that I can handle taking responsibility, I'm not going to take responsibility.
So when you talk about taking responsibility for your actions, now, to me, that is something that, and I've been conditioned to believe, thanks to, like, the justice system, that is something that we do after the action has happened, right? Now, the way you're talking, though, it sounds to me like responsibility for your actions is like a preemptive decision.
I would agree. I think in our society, responsibility is very reactive. It often comes at the end. But if we can get better and be more proactive and become aware and think through things before we make our choices, then that responsibility can look very different.
So we are coming to a place now in our therapy journey. we recognize, and we're not going to tell them, I'm not going to tell you to quit. And we're going to work on recognizing our behavior, and then taking responsibility for our behavior before the bad thing happens, whether that be the using, the anger, the porn, the whatever, right? So when we're talking about stopping it, now, I have a good friend, his name's Rand Teed. He says, you cannot take away something without giving something back. Now, when we stop that behavior, where do we divert it to? Like, where can that energy go instead?
Right. So that's where we have to figure out why we're using that behavior in the first place. So if we just white knuckle try to quit something, there's not a high success rate for that. We need to understand why we're doing what we're doing. What we find is for the vast majority of our behaviors, they're fed by two things: emotions that we don't want to feel, or that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, being triggered. So when we're drawn to those behaviors, whether it's anger or alcohol or drugs or whatever, porn, whatever it might be, we need to stop and go, okay, what's been going on? What have the last 72 hours, maybe week, been like? What are the experiences that I've been through? What's the emotion that I've felt because of those experiences? What core belief has been triggered? As we go through and recognize those emotions and that core belief, the need to use the behavior goes away because it's what we're doing to cope with it. Now, we take someone, my typical clients are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. My oldest clients go up into their 70s. They've been taught for a very long time, suppress your emotions, suppress your emotions, suppress your moments. So then Sabrina comes around.
Except for
says,
anger.
Yeah, exactly. Anger's the only one that's more socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Been around for generations, for sure.
Yeah.
Then Sabrina comes around and says, okay, I want you to start feeling your emotions. Well, you don't even know where to start. So one of the things I do with my clients is we actually have a list of emotions that I give every one of my clients, usually second or third session, and they print them off. And I tell them, print off 5, 6, 7 copies of them and lay them all around your house. Put them on your fridge, in your car, put one on your phone, in your living room, in your bedroom, and just start becoming more aware of what you're feeling. If you're feeling something and you read through an emotions list, those emotions will pop off the page at you. To try to just sit there and think about what you're feeling when you've spent your whole life avoiding them, it's really, really difficult. We come up with the 4 basic: happy, angry, scared, and sad. Those are the 4 that most people are fairly aware of. But there's a whole bunch of other ones underneath that we aren't really even aware of because we're so busy trying to push them down. So what we talk about is we go through and we read through the emotions. I have a client, pick an emotion. And then I say, okay, what does that feel like physically in your body? An emotion is a physiological response to our thoughts. So what happens is we have a thought that creates a chemical reaction that we then feel physiologically in our body. But if we don't know what it feels like in our body to feel lonely, to feel vulnerable, then how can I feel that emotion if I don't know what it feels like? So we start right at the head. What does your head feel like when you're feeling that emotion? What do your eyes do? What does your jaw do? What happens to your throat? What do your shoulders do? Your chest, your breathing, your hands, your arms, your stomach. We go down the whole entire body where we really start to look at what does that emotion feel like physically in your body. And we often do start with those, basic ones because we're a bit more familiar with those. But then we get into the other ones. And then we talk about, so I go through, mad. What does that feel like in your body? Tell me about a time in your life where you felt mad. Then we go to the next emotion. What does that feel like in your body? Tell me a time in your life where you felt that emotion. Our brain can't really tell the difference between a thought and what's really what happened in the past. So when I'm talking about a time in my life where I felt lonely, I'm actually going to start to feel lonely. My body is going to respond. So I'm going to be able to get a better understanding of what it feels like. Part of what also makes this really challenging is it's very rare that we feel one emotion. We're usually feeling 5, 6, 10 different emotions all at the same time. So we need to get better at understanding what those emotions are. Otherwise, it's really overwhelming, especially if I've spent most of my life suppressing them and holding them down. So what I'll often do is if someone comes in and says, man, I've really been thinking about alcohol a lot this week. It's like, okay, let's take a look at your week. What's happened? And so they go through and talk about everything that's happened in their week. And I jot down, the experiences. My dog ran away. I was late for work. I don't know if I'm going to have enough money for till the next payday. Our furnace is kind of breaking down, whatever it is.
How about I was really bored and didn't have anything to do?
Yep. Boredom is a big one, right? Because what happens when you're bored? Well, then you have to start thinking about all these things that you've spent your whole life avoiding. You have to feel feel these emotions that you spent your whole life avoiding. So we do not like to feel bored.
Or lonely. I felt lonely this week.
Right.
You know, and again, let me just point something out there. It's very easy for us as a society, and even in this conversation, I'm noticing it is like, well, how did your week go? And immediately you're talking about, oh, bills, oh, house, oh, like tactile things that are outside. Right.
Right.
And it's like, well, how about like, I wasn't able to go, like if you're an AA guy, like I wasn't able to go to a meeting. I wasn't able to talk to my friends. I felt lonely. I didn't have enough to do. I was bored. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know,
Right.
Things that are, outwardly anchored, but that leaves us with this void.
Right. And that's what we do with all of those experience, my dog running away, boredom, whatever it is. We go through and make a list of all those things. And then I go back with each one and say, okay, what emotions did you feel when you experienced that one? What emotions did you feel when you experienced that one? And so we go through that and look at all the emotions. I list them all, write them all down, make sure they've got that. And then I say, okay, what's the commonality? Do you see anything here that has been going on maybe the vast majority of your life? Wow, look at that. Unheard comes up a whole bunch of times this week. Powerless comes up a whole bunch of times this week. Those are big ones that I felt a lot throughout my childhood. So now we start to see that, okay, unheard and powerless have been really significant. I've got a bigger need to go to that coping strategy to push those down. But now that I'm talking about it, I'm allowing myself to feel it even just a little bit in counseling. Hopefully there's more emotion. They're feeling, there's tears or whatever it might be, and they're allowing themselves to feel that emotion. They're understanding why they've got that urge to go to that coping strategy lessons, because now my brain is understanding why I'm going there. Understanding the emotions, and then we go back again and look at, okay, what core belief was being triggered through those experiences? Not good enough, not important, not valued. So we really pick everything apart into really small pieces. Lonely is a tricky one because a lot of people will say, when no one was around, I felt really lonely.
And that's often something that happens in early recovery, right? Because our whole life is different now and we don't have the new friends yet.
Right.
So I would say that that's probably like top 3.
Lonely is a big one. But again, we want to look at a bit of a deeper level. When we have friends and relationships and all those kind of things, they're distractions. When I'm sitting still and I'm feeling lonely, that's there. That's lonely. It's there likely all along. It's just covered up or distracted by all these other things that I have going on. Loneliness usually comes from within myself, feeling not content with who I am, feeling like there's just more and I don't know where it is, feeling lost. That's really what that lonely. You can feel lonely being in a room with 1,000 people.
Oh, I know it.
Right?
I know it.
So lonely is more about that personal. The more you build on yourself, the more you build your confidence, the more you challenge that core belief, feel more good enough, important, and valued, the more you're willing to take responsibility and ownership for your own actions and behaviors, the less lonely you feel. That's more of a internal piece that's happening there than it really is about everyone out here. I see people go to all kinds of different extremes as a way of avoiding feeling lonely. Let's just deal with feeling lonely. It's our emotions are our responses to our thoughts. We need to stop trying to avoid feeling them and just feel them. So I feel lonely. Okay, I'm just going to sit in feeling lonely. And I'll realize that when I get to the other side of it, I handled it. Wasn't fun. I might not even have been very graceful in doing it, but I did it. I can handle it. We spend so much time avoiding feeling our emotions when if we just stopped and realized, okay, I just got to feel this. Not going to be fun, not going to be comfortable, but I need to do it to get healthier on the other side. Then feeling our emotions becomes less and less scary, and it doesn't stop us. Emotions is what stops most of us dead in our tracks. I was listening to one of your podcasts and you were talking about, opportunities that are coming up. This model kind of says there's always opportunities. We're just so busy looking down because we're scared of not trusting in ourselves that we can handle the opportunities. We don't see them. When I start to believe in myself, when I believe in myself that I can handle feeling my emotions, I can look up And there's opportunities all over the place. I just wasn't able to see them before because I didn't believe in myself that I could handle the responsibility, the emotions that comes with taking those opportunities.
How do we start to feel different?
So there's a couple basic things that I always work with my clients. The first things that are really important to ask yourself, and really for parents to ask their children as well, two important things. What are you thinking and what are you feeling?
I ask my kids that all the time.
Good.
What are you thinking?
As parents will often say, oh, that must have made you feel sad. Well, we don't really know if it did make them feel sad or not. To say, what are you feeling? Where then they have to tell us what they're feeling. We're getting a more realistic answer. Now, when you first start talking to your kids about emotions, if they're not used to it, they're going to say, I don't know.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so we need to start by even giving them a few examples. So maybe I've got the emotions list out and I pick 3 or 4 or 5, and now they have to pick 1 or 2, but they're getting better at being able to label their emotions. But that's a very open-ended question, which now they are really giving me what they want. I'm going to hear more genuinely what they're thinking. They're having to make a decision. They're having a voice and saying what they need to do. In doing those things, they're developing that core belief. I am good enough. I am important. I am valued. They're feeling heard. They're feeling, they're getting to take responsibility, make their own decisions. These are all really important skills that we need to develop in our kids. If I just tell my child, oh, you must feel sad, and they say yes, they're not really developing any skills other than not having a voice and saying what they think their parent thinks they should say. That's not good. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling? 2 really, really important questions to ask ourselves and to ask, our loved ones, our children, our partners, whatever it might be. So there's kind of the 2 pieces. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? The other thing we look at is, okay, let's go through the experience of what just happened, and then let's break it down. What did you do well? What did you not do well? What could you have done differently? And what are the strategies you could put in place to manage it differently next time? So we're looking at each specific behavior. So I got in a fight with my partner. I yelled. I got drunk. I said I'm leaving, whatever it might be. We'd look at each one of those kind of things and talk about, okay, what did you do well? What did you not do well? What could you have done differently to manage it? And often with anger and stuff like that, one of the things I could do differently is I should have stopped as soon as I started to feel angry and removed myself and taken a break. If I would have done that, none of that other stuff would have happened, because I would have taken a break, let my cortisol level comes back down. We often, in these arguments, we end up saying things that after we go, geez, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Well, the only way you get there is you have to remove yourself from that situation before it happens. When we have high levels of cortisol in our brain, our ability to use logic and reason, understand consequences, sequence events, connect to emotions, memory, they're all massively impacted. And so when I'm angry, when I have a lot of anxiety, I have a lot more cortisol in my brain. I cannot think straight. So I need to take a break, let that cortisol level go back down. So now I can have a more calm, rational conversation. A lot of times my clients say, well, yeah, when we just never go back and talk about it. Okay, well, let's start there. At least if you never go back and talk about it, you're not damaging the relationship.
Whoa, hang on now. That's contentious. So, we don't go back and talk about it. So not going back and talking about an occurrence that happened in a relationship could actually be a good thing?
In the start.
Okay.
We want to keep working on things. So remember, part of this model of therapy is we break things down into really, really small steps. And so my clients will say, well, we never go back and talk about it. Or, if we take a break, we're never going to go back and talk about it. I say, well, in your last 30 fights, how many times did you find a productive way of dealing with it? Well, we didn't. Okay, so another 3, 4, 5 times, as really our focus right now is not resolving the argument. Our focus right now is not having the argument happen. How do we stop and break that cycle first? So once we get to that place where we're taking a break, that's working well. We're doing good at taking a break and not having that conflict. Then it's like, okay, now how do we go back and work on resolving that issue? But if I'm trying to resolve the issue and not get into the conflict is it's too much. The chances we're going to end up coming back and then having the explosion becomes really high. So we need to take it into small steps where ultimate goal is, yeah, we're coming back, we're talking about the situation. And what we usually recommend for that is you come back to the conversation where all I am focusing on is me. What could I have done differently in the situation? What do I need to take responsibility for? Now, hopefully my partner is coming back with that same view of what do I need to take responsibility for? And then we go from there to the next step of, okay, now our goal is I'm just going to try to understand my partner. So I want my partner to explain their perspective. I am just going to try to listen and understand where they are coming from. And then I'm going to say my perspective, and I just want my partner to listen and understand where I am coming from. Then we get to the final stage where we're doing all that and coming to a solution of how we're going to handle it that is respectful for all parties involved.
I've found myself, even to this very day, when Donna and I have a disagreement, or if I really want her to understand something, or even if she wants me to understand something and I just try to fix her problems by saying this or by saying that. And I'm really learning to pull back what I think should happen in this situation and just listen, because I want to communicate in great detail exactly how I feel. I want to make sure that I'm articulating myself perfectly so that there's no question left. This is what Dan wants.
And I agree with you. I think communication is really, really, really important, but it's like everything. We have to build on top of the skills. If I try to build a house on sand, it might look really good for a year or two, but then it's going to crumble and fall apart. I need to start with the foundation. So the first thing I need to do is not damage the relationship with conflict. So let's just focus on that. Once that skill is filled, then we slowly build on it, and then we slowly build on it. Even if I have clients that are saying, I want to exercise more. I say, okay, well, park a little bit farther away at the grocery store and walk a few extra steps. Let's start there. We need to break things into really small steps. One of the things that we see with people with anxiety, often struggling with addictions is, and I think I've heard you say it on a couple of your podcasts, it's that kind of 0 to 100. It's all or nothing, right? That's not going to be of any benefit in the long run. We need to find that balance in the middle where we're slowly building on things. But again, that comes back to my core belief. If I feel not good enough, I'm not going to trust in myself that I can handle making these decisions and making these slow processes. So I'm just going to go from one extreme to the other, because I don't really have to make any decision. It's just all or nothing. If I find that balance, then I have to trust in myself that I can handle making those decisions.
Not good enough. So someone comes in and through conversation and work, it is discovered that this core belief is that person is not good enough. How do you convince them otherwise?
I don't. It's kind of like me telling you to stop using. If I try to convince you of something, it's actually one of the keys I use in therapy. As soon as I feel like I'm trying to convince my client of something, I stop. My goal is not to convince you of anything. My goal is to provide information, provide experiences where you start to change your own thinking. Because as soon as I try to convince you, you're going to dig your heels in. Even if I'm 100% right, no one wants to be told what to do. Can I just go back to one thing that you said a bit ago? You talked about you and your wife in when she's talking about something and you just want to try to fix it and try to make her feel better. Again, that's emotion based. Her feeling emotion creates emotion in you. You don't want to feel your emotion, so you need to fix her problem so her emotions go away.
And I can feel adequate.
Exactly.
Do you ever work with people that are struggling because they have loved ones who are using?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, someone who's using, it's about accountability and understanding why they're doing what they're doing. What emotions are they suppressing with their choice of addiction? What core belief are they avoiding with their choice of addiction? When I'm working with a spouse or a parent of someone who is struggling with addictions, it's kind of the same thing. What's your part in this? What can you do? You can't change them. So how do you accept that they are where they are with boundaries that you need to put in you for safety as well? So it's helping them feel more become more confident in how to manage that situation. And a lot of times that's dealing with their own stuff as well. Their guilt, a parent often carries a lot of guilt when their child is struggling with an addiction. So it's talking with a parent about, okay, well, what is your part? How did you contribute to all of this that's going on? Ultimately, that person's decision is their decision, but there's a part that you play. How much did you teach your child to talk about and feel emotions? How much did you reinforce and support that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued? Helping them sort through and understand their role, their responsibility can be very empowering for them, where they can let go of some of that guilt and shame that they're carrying with it.
To me, I mean, the first thought I had would be like, that would be incredibly difficult to because maybe people don't know that they did something wrong, and all of a sudden, no, you definitely played a part in this. Let's figure that out. So I'm sure, like, when you unpack that, and there was like, oh my God, I fell short here, I fell short there, I fell short there, and now my son is on the street addicted to crystal meth. Like that must be a very powerful moment that happens in your office. What do you do with that when someone becomes overwhelmed with grief or shame or something like that? Like, how do you help them bring that back into homeostasis?
So the first thing I do is I just sit very quietly. I don't say anything and I don't move, and I just let them feel the emotion. They need to let it out. They've been carrying that. They know it's there. It's been sitting in the back of their head for a really long time. They've just never allowed themselves to bring it out. So when they bring that out, I don't want to do anything that's going to get them to shut down that emotion. So I just sit very quietly and very still. And it is something, very first session with my clients, we talk about that. When you feel emotion, I am just going to sit very quiet and very still and let you feel whatever it is you need to feel. Because as soon as I say or do anything, you're automatically going to start to shut down your emotion. So they know that's coming. We've talked about it. And usually by the time we get to that point, there have been experiences that have happened where I have just sat quietly and let them feel what they need to feel. So we need to let them let that emotion out. And then we talk a bit about it, right? You didn't teach your child how to feel emotions. Well, why didn't you do that? Well, because no one taught you. And so there's a responsibility in it, but there also needs to be an understanding of, okay, why? Is it because you're a horrible parent? No, that's almost never the answer. I really truly believe that everyone does the best they can with what they've got. And so helping them understand, so now they've got more, allows them to be able to see things and understand things in a very different way. Instead of focusing on the addiction, they can start to focus more on their son or their daughter and the hurt that they may be experiencing, to be going through what they're going through. Especially if I have a parent who isn't using and doesn't have addictions, I'll say, what would it take for you to be struggling and using as much as your child is? They say, well, I would never do that. I say, yeah, but your child's living that. What is that like for them? You can't even fathom what it would be like to be in that experience, and they're living that. That creates more understanding, more compassion, more empathy of what they're really going through. Now, instead of seeing the addictions, I start to see the person behind the addictions.
When someone comes to terms with their part in these things, do you find that it helps them put boundaries in place? And like, what do those boundaries look like? Like, how do you have that conversation with a parent about having healthy boundaries? Because you deserve to have a safe life too.
Right. And so one of the things we talk about is, what is their life experience with boundaries? Again, if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, there's a higher likelihood I am going to struggle with boundaries. Because I'm not going to believe in myself that I have a voice. I'm not going to believe in myself that I have a right to a voice. And so my boundaries are often going to be really, really, really strict, no flexibility whatsoever. Or to the other extreme, kind of like we talked about, one extreme to the other, where I don't really have any boundaries. I don't reinforce boundaries. People can kind of walk all over me. I'm a people pleaser. I never say no, don't really have any boundaries at all. So the first thing we need to look at is, what is your level of boundaries that you're willing to put in place? Then we need to focus on challenging and changing that core belief, sorting through the emotions, understanding the responsibility piece for all the different aspects of your life. Then we look at those boundaries as well of, okay, what is a fair boundary that is respectful of you and respectful of the person you're putting boundaries in place? A lot of times boundaries are 100% me or 100% everyone else, that all or nothing. Boundaries need to be respectful of myself, but also respectful of that other person. So maybe I put a boundary in place where I say, if you're using or if you're under the influence, I will not have any interactions with you. But if you are sober, then I'm willing to meet you for a coffee or something along those lines. As that boundary is respected more and more, then maybe it's okay. Now you're welcome to come over for dinner for an hour or whatever it might be. We've got to build that trust that those boundaries are being respected. As the boundaries are being respected, then I can add boundaries to it. As the boundaries are being challenged or being disrespected, then I need to put other boundaries in place as well. So boundaries shouldn't be an all or nothing. We need to figure out what's that balance.
Well, and that in putting a boundary in place that leaves your child homeless. You know, a lot of parents would be like, I would never allow my child to be homeless. And then they're faced with that because it's simply not safe. And by not safe, I mean, you know, we get violent, you know, we steal, we lie, we trample, we bring people over. Like they're like awful things happen. And anybody who's a parent out there that's listening right now, like, you get it, right? Like that happens.
Yeah.
But before we keep going on that, I want to just take a quick break and read off today's sponsors. Okay, EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider in mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering from substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has announced its path for the pursuit of self-government. As an MNS citizen, I am proud to see my government fight to protect my rights. This is our moment. To learn more about the treaty and our path to self-government, go to ourmoment.ca. Wellness News, choice for healthy living. Hey, you're going to the Wellness Expo. These guys, they're their media sponsor. Yeah. Wellness News, choice for healthy living is a local resource that works to connect people to health and wellness related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals locally, allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our merch, or if you want to show some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below.
So if we can just go back to the boundaries where you're saying, you know, a parent having to, you know, put a boundary in place, which leaves their child homeless.
Yeah.
Again, you know, if my child comes home smoking pot for the first or second time, that's an unrealistic boundary, right? So those boundaries slowly progress. So I want to be working with my child. And again, it's not just focusing on the addiction. A lot of parents will say, you know, well, you can't use. What we really need to say is, why are you using? What's going on? What's happening that's creating this for you? We need to get a better understanding of what's happening. If we do that, then a lot of times we're supporting them. If we just focus on the addiction, really high likelihood we're not going to have a lot of success.
Just focusing on the using.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Even before it's an addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we need to look at the person and what's really going on and where those struggles are with them. As the child continues to make choices and is using more and more significantly, then those boundaries need to adjust and change accordingly as well. And so we often see kids that are struggling with addictions, self-harming behaviors, thoughts of suicide. It often is just feeling very, very alone, very unheard. And so just being able to listen to them and just hear what they have to say. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to solve it for them. Just listen to what they're saying. Thank them for sharing that information with you. That's what they need to hear so that they start feeling more validated. If the more they do that, the less they need to suppress those emotions of feeling unheard, unloved, disconnected, because they're feeling more of that sense of connection. So that piece kind of comes with it as you move forward. The other piece that I think is really important is the brain chemistry piece. And so when we look at addictions, a lot of times we see people whose brain chemicals are not where they're supposed to be. So every time we experience trauma, what happens is it messes up our brain's chemicals. So if we've had a lot of trauma and a lot of experiences, the chances that our brain isn't producing enough serotonin or dopamine or whatever it may be is really, really high. When we use, it gives our brain a different chemical that creates that kind of calm and settled peace, but it's not really giving our brain what we really need.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes looking at it from that piece of maybe I do need to look at a serotonin medication or a dopamine medication that I'm taking on a daily basis to give my brain the chemicals it needs so it can slow down. A lot of people who struggle with anxiety often go to marijuana as a way to just slow their brain down.
Man, that ramped my brain up.
Well, and that's where we see it goes from one extreme to the other, right? It either slows their brain rate down or it speeds it right up, creates a lot of paranoia, or it makes things calm and settled. So it's a little bit different. But we're using those drugs because it's working. It's doing something to our brain that's making us feel a bit better, whatever better looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look at what's going on there.
Mm.
I kind of look at medication sort of like a pair of running shoes. So if I'm trying to go for a run and I'm barefoot, it takes a lot of work. I really have to be careful where every step is. It's going to be more painful. It takes a lot more energy and a lot more effort.
Mm-hmm.
If I put running shoes on, I still have to run, but now it makes it a little bit easier for me to navigate. Now I just have to focus on getting to the end line. I don't have to focus on every single step that I'm taking. So maybe a bit of a different understanding around anxiety might be of benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we look at anxiety, a lot of people struggle with addictions. A lot of people who are just using unhealthy coping strategies, often it's to suppress those emotions. And one of the big ones there is anxiety. The more emotions I'm holding in, the more likely I'm going to have anxiety because I'm so busy holding in everything I've got. Any little thing now just becomes more overwhelming, creating more anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So there's anxiety, that's okay. So anxiety is our response to danger, that fight, flight, freeze response. So when I'm in danger, I have anxiety, I go into fight, flight, freeze. That's good. We need that. It needs to keep us alive. We're not worried about that kind of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety that's creating that sense of danger. That's the one that is crippling for a lot of people, where I'm creating these scenarios in my head where I think I'm in danger, but I'm not really in danger.
That was a big part of, and still to this day, I'll be driving down Circle Drive, just regular Tuesday, and suddenly I'm making up violent scenarios in my head of things that haven't even happened, and it's giving me such anxiety that I almost can't breathe.
Yeah.
You know, like, and nothing is even wrong or happening. It's a calm and beautiful day.
Yeah.
And I'm just like white knuckling the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's that sense of danger, those what if scenarios, creating all these things in our head where our brain thinks we are in danger, putting us into that fight, flight, freeze response, but we're not really in danger.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's much more of a problem that we need to work on. And what we often see is people who've struggled, had a past with addictions, had a lot of trauma growing up. Their brain is now constantly looking for danger because growing up there was real danger. So our brain becomes programmed to look for danger. But now I'm out, I'm on my own, not in that dangerous situation anymore, but my brain is still programmed to look for danger.
Mm-hmm.
So when it goes there and it doesn't find any, it creates a scenario where now my brain feels that sense of danger, even though I'm not really in danger.
Mm.
So it's those negative thoughts, paranoid thoughts, worry thoughts, overthinking things, feeling like no matter what, it's never good enough. Yeah, all those kind of things create that sense of danger. For people who have high anxiety, that can be happening hundreds to even thousands of times a day.
Well, and for me, and what I've discovered that may be the source of it is that if my brain gets worked up enough, it gets to get high.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, like it's looking for that chemical,
Yep.
that release. And if it makes my day bad enough, I'll give it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where we need to kind of really work on how do we bring that down so it's not as significant. We kind of feel a bit more kind of calm and settled. When we go into this fight, flight, freeze response, adrenaline gets dumped into our body. So again, if I'm really in danger, this is a good thing. It gives me that boost of energy to run or to fight through the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Sense of danger, where now my body is being dumped with adrenaline, but I'm not really in danger. I don't need to fight. I don't need to run away. I'm just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Now we see people, they're always moving. They can't really sit still. They're always playing with things, fidgeting. They're tired because it takes a lot of energy to constantly be having this adrenaline being dumped into their body.
Mm-hmm.
But the other important thing is, where does this energy come from? What happens when we get the adrenaline dump and this boost of energy? All of our non-vital organs are zapped of energy. So bladder, bowel, immune system, endocrine system, stomach, kidney, skin, they all get zapped of energy. So again, real danger happens once in a while, not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Sense of danger, where this is happening 100 times a day, it has a massive impact. If my stomach is being zapped 100 times a day, I shouldn't expect it to digest food properly.
Mm.
So we see things like irritable bowel syndrome, allergies, asthma, skin conditions, even getting sick. People get sick and they're sick for, 10 days instead of 3 or 4 days. If your immune system is constantly being zapped of energy, it's not going to help you stay healthy. Even connected to cancer cells. Cancer feeds off of unhealthy cells. If my body is constantly in recovery from this fight, flight, freeze, there's a higher risk that I'm going to develop cancer.
And that's how stress is bad for your health.
That's exactly right.
Huh.
That's what happens physically in our body. Yeah.
Wow. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we've got that going on in our body, and then we also have something happening in our brain. So when we go into fight, flight, freeze, that fight, flight, freeze response is found in our amygdala. And that's a really tiny part of the brain. That little part of the brain is never going to win against the big brain. It just doesn't work. So what happens is cortisol gets dumped into our brain. Cortisol is a toxin. It shuts your brain off so you cannot think. Ability, we talked a bit about this, can't use logic and reason, understand consequences, sequence events, connect to emotions, memory, can't do it. All our brain is wanting to know is, do I run, do I hide, do I fight? That's it. High levels of cortisol over a long period of time, childhood, connected to attention deficit, focus problems, learning disabilities, it changes the way we think. So we need to be really aware of that. It damages our brain. So if we can get better at managing and bringing down this sense of danger, we are going to make a huge difference in our body physically and in our thinking process. The vast majority of my clients come in and they say, my memory is shot. As they work through things, their memory gets better and better and better because their brain is constantly not being dumped with cortisol. People come in with really bad, irritable bowel syndrome. By the end of counseling, their stomach's fine. They can eat anything because it's not the food or those kind of things. It's this constant zap of energy where their body is just not able to function properly. All these different things, being really micromanaging and organizing,
Yelling at
forgetful, all these things that are symptoms of anxiety as it's becoming more and more intense. If I can learn what those are, put strategies in place earlier, then I can bring it down, right? And maybe at that top is that the addictive behavior, whether it's anger or really high anxiety or drug use or alcohol. If I can realize at a lower level, I'm starting to go there, I can go and do some strategies to put in place. I don't have to go to that higher place, but we have to be aware. And really, anxiety is our body giving us cues that something's not right. There's something going on here. Recognize those cues and use them to help you bring things down is very empowering. Recognizing them and going, oh my God, I got anxiety. That's just going to fuel it. Make it
You have anxiety about having anxiety?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I give my clients the list, I tell them, you may have anxiety looking at this list of anxiety. That's okay. That's the first step. As you continue to use it, it brings it back down. So then we want to look at strategies. One of the best strategies we can use is kind of like what you said, breathing.
Oh, I breathe every morning.
Yeah.
Two things that have, well, three things. So in the morning I breathe. I have a 10-second guided meditation that I breathe, and there's breath retention involved there and different things. The gym, I go to the gym. I try to go to the gym every day. I'm getting better. And the third is while I'm at the gym, I steam and then cold shower. And after I do those three things, life is better.
Just brings things
Life is
down.
better.
Yeah.
It doesn't stay better all day, but that's a good way to start
starting
it.
off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What happens with breathing is there's research that shows that breathing actually stops cortisol from being dumped into your brain. So when your anxiety is getting high, stopping and taking a few breaths can be really beneficial. Again, breathing before it's a 10 out of 10, breathing at a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is going to be even more effective because you're not having to deal with it at a 10 out of 10. Starting your day with breathing. What I even recommend with my clients is incorporate a couple breaths into something you do. If you drink water, every time you have a drink of water, take a deep breath or two. It just brings things back down. Every time you go to the bathroom, look at your phone, whatever it might be, take a deep breath. If you're breathing throughout the day, it's going to help keep those cortisol levels down. Generally, as the day goes on, our anxiety progresses. It's just life. That's what happens. But if I can keep kind of bringing it back down, it's not going to be as high at the end of the day. So breathing is a really, really, really effective one. Exercise, again, when we exercise, we're producing more serotonin. Serotonin is that chemical in our brain that makes us kind of just go, feel more calm and settled. So if we have high anxiety, the chances that we're not getting enough serotonin is pretty high. So if I can exercise, create more serotonin, I'm going to feel more calm and settled. Another really, really important coping strategy, though, is making a plan. So remember, anxiety is not believing in myself I can handle things. A lot of people say anxiety is about the trigger, right? I have anxiety of heights. Well, if it was about heights, every single person would have anxiety of heights. Not everyone does. So it's not about heights. It's about my belief in my ability to handle it. If I believe I can handle heights, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't, I'm going to have anxiety. So anxiety is lack of confidence. So if I make a plan, I'm going to feel more confident in how I can handle things. So making a plan is a really significant coping strategy. It works for real danger, but it also works for that sense of danger. So kind of like you're saying where you're driving and you're having that anxious thought, actually take that thought, write it down on a piece of paper and think, okay, what would happen what would I do? What's my plan? How would I handle this? Once your brain realizes, oh, I'd handle it. Might not be graceful, but you would handle it. That anxious thought becomes less and less and less. We often just let it spin and spin and spin, or we just try to block it and pretend it's not really there. We need to solve it. Making a plan can be really helpful. And so even, with your kids, your kid comes home and says, I'm worried about failing my social studies test. We often just say, well, don't worry about it, or we'll study and we're fine.
You'll do fine.
Exactly. Where we need to say, okay, well, what would happen if you did fail your socials test? What would you do? How would you handle that? Well, I'd talk to the teacher and, see if I could rewrite, or I could do extra assignments, or make sure I study harder for the next test, or whatever it might be. We help them realize that even if I do fail it, I'd handle it. We are way more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. Once we realize that everything we've been through in our lives, we've handled, we can handle that anxious thought. It's very empowering to help us figure that out. Then I would talk to, your son and say, okay, so we know what you do if you failed your test. What can we do to prevent that from happening as well? So how do we study and those kind of things as well? But we need to sort through that stuff and get a better understanding. Making a plan helps us believe in ourselves more. We can handle something. More belief in self, less anxiety.
Where can people find your book?
I'm on Amazon. I'm on Amazon. Basically, that's the cheapest place to find it. If you just look up Not Good Enough, and Sabrina Trobak, Trobak, it should pop up for you for sure.
And there's also a link in the show notes below. So if you don't feel like doing all that Googling, you can just look in the show notes down there. There's a bunch of other links down there too you can check out. Sabrina.
I do have, on my website, I also have a blog section that's just, again, people with anxiety, not as much focus, it gets overwhelmed easily. So the blogs are 2 to 4 minute reads around all kinds of different areas around mental health. And I also have a page on there that has the various podcast interviews that I've done as well, to just get a bit of a different information. So my website has all my links to my socials, how to buy the book. It's got a lot of information on there just around mental health and anxiety and core belief as well.
Okay. That link is also in the show notes below.
There you go.
Okay, Sabrina, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a very enlightening conversation. I appreciate you taking time and being here with me today. And I suppose that's it. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.